He's supposed to wear red, I wear the blue. But we look like we work at Kmart or something. But anyway, Tom really is my personal tax advisor. He's a CPA. And how many people in this room have had bad CPAs? How many people have had great CPAs? Good, thank you. How many people have CPAs that are cowards who want you to pay taxes? Those are the worst CPAs, okay? But Tom is, most of you know if you're entrepreneurs or you're taxpayers, taxes are our single largest expense. And I've had great CPAs, but Tom is the best. And so I asked him to write this book here, Tax-Free Wealth. He was really my advisor. And anybody who hates paying taxes, this is the book. And the best thing about Tom, he makes it simple and understandable for entrepreneurs like me to understand. And the reason Tom is so good at what he does, he's also an entrepreneur. He starts companies and things like this. So I'd like to introduce my advisor, Tom Wheelwright. Big hand for him.
Thank you.
So I see a show of hands. How many people have read Rich Dad, Poor Dad? Good, thank you. Who has not yet read the book? Oh my God. I'm always afraid that someday there'll be no buyers out there. Well, it's been 21 years. It's still top 10 on Amazon. Top 10, I think it's number 1 in Japan today. It's even number 6 in France, the Communist Republic of France. The only place that doesn't sell well is the Communist Republic of California. So it's but anyway, the story of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I'll quickly draw this schematic here. Okay. The reason Rich Dad, Poor Dad is so successful, it's basically a book on accounting. That's all it is. And how many people in this book have studied accounting? Good. How many people have never studied accounting? You're lucky. It is the single most boring subject on planet Earth, you know what I mean? And so that's why Tom helps me. But Rich Dad, this is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I was born in Hawaii. I'm 4th generation Japanese American, which means I don't speak Japanese. So a lot of people come and practice on me. I say, I don't do that stuff, you know. I barely speak English. But Rich Dad, Poor Dad is simply a book on accounting. And Tom's been one of the best guides on it because this is how it started. So when I was 9 years old, my rich dad very simply said to me, you know, he says, because I was flunking out of school. My poor dad was the head of education for the state of Hawaii. And my rich dad was my best friend's father, who never finished school. And the reason he never finished school was because his father died when he was 13. And at 13, rich dad had to take over the family business. So this was the difference. Rich dad went to school in real school. He didn't have fake teachers. So you have fake teacher is somebody who doesn't do what they teach. So Rich Dad was taught by his accountants, his bookkeepers, his attorneys, his banker, his brokers. So he had every day they were in the business of business. And one of the reasons I dropped out of my MBA program was because the teachers were fake. You know, when I was sitting in, I was a Marine pilot. I was still just coming back from Vietnam in 1973, and I enrolled in the MBA program in Honolulu. I was stationed at Kaneohe Marine Corps Air Station. And I sat in the MBA class, and this teacher comes out. The guy was younger than me, because I was already 27. And he didn't know what he was talking about. And I asked him a real quick question. I said, "Are you an accountant?" He says, "Yes, I have a master's in accountancy." I said, "That's not the question." And being a Marine, how many people remember the Vietnam era? I was not a popular guy sitting in an MBA class among all these communist students. And, you know, they're spitting at me. So I'm sitting there, I said, and so these kids are like 20 years old, whatever they are. And I've just come back. I've had friends die and all this stuff. I got to put up with their BS, you know. So I'm sitting in this class, and I asked the instructor, I said, tell me, I just repeat the question. I'm a Marine lieutenant. I just don't like BS, you know. And I said, are you an accountant? He says, yes, I have a master's in accounting. I said, that's not the question. Are you an accountant? He says, I have a master in accountants. I said, have you ever been an accountant? He says, no. I resigned from the MBA program. He had no idea what he was talking about. And that's one of the problems of young people today. They're going to school with teachers who don't know what they're talking about. I remember I went to military school, the academy in New York, and I asked my calculus teacher, I said, when will I ever use this calculus? He says, I don't know. I said, why do you teach it? He said, I get paid. And today, my brain is still messed up, taking 3 years of calculus. I had no idea what I was studying. Okay? So anyway, Tom has really helped me with things like this. But Rich Dad Poor Dad is about income, expense, assets, and liabilities. That's all it's about. And one more thing, the most important word for those of you who are in real business is a statement of cash flow. That's all it is. So very simply, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the statement of cash flow says, assets, put money in your pocket, liabilities, take money from your pocket. That's all the book's about. And so the reason people are in trouble financially is they buy houses they think are assets, but it's really taking money from your pocket, whereas I buy a piece of rental property and put money in my pocket. That's the difference. So that's all Rich Dad, Poor Dad was about. Any comments on this, Tom?
No, that's why I love Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? So how many world famous books are there about accounting? I think one. So no, what most people don't recognize either is that, you know, liability is okay if it's producing an asset because it's all about the cash flow.
Yeah. See, this is the word asset is a noun. A house is a noun, but you don't know if it's an asset or liability until you apply the verb, which is cash flow. So I can have a rental property and it's producing income one day, but it goes vacant and now it shifts into a liability the next day. And that's what happened to many people in 2008. They got hammered because their tenants moved out or they lost their jobs or whatever it is. So basically all Rich Dad was produced 1997, 21 years ago. And it's very simply about what they should teach kids about money. You know, that's all it's about. So this here is the second book, and it was called the Cash Flow Quadrant. And this is the Cash Flow Quadrant. So again, I'm 9 or 10 years old. My rich dad's teaching me assets versus liabilities, and then he starts teaching me about the four people in the world of business. And how many people read the Cash Flow Quadrant? Good, thank you. For those who haven't, very simply, E stands for employee. My poor dad always said, go to school to get a job. That's why they're employees. Well, my mom wanted me to be a specialist, like a doctor or attorney or a lawyer or a pizza shop owner. And I said to my mom, I was a C student. I'll never become a doctor. She says, you're right. You're not going to make it. But anyway.
Now, if you're starting to see why Robert's strategy is mathematically better, and it's strong mathematically rather than reckless, the 30-day tax cut playbook is the fastest way to apply this thinking to your situation. Scan the QR code on the screen right now.
But this is where Tom comes in, is because, as Tom will tell you, employees pay 40%. All these guys are becoming entrepreneurs.